25th Sports Banquet Hall of Fame. This is the 25th year that the local chamber has been able to put on this event, and we feel privileged to do so because there's so many great athletes that are recognized, coaches that are recognized within our community, and we appreciate the opportunity to get to do that. I want to recognize the committee that works hard to put this together. Mike Harwood, if you would please stand, and if you served with Mike on this committee, please stand at this time. And I know there's many others out there. Okay, let's give them a round of applause. And if you would join with me in prayer, I'm going to lead us in an invocation, and after that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Harwood. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the gifts that you give us. Lord, we thank you for the athletes and the coaches and the spectators that are here tonight. We thank you especially for the ones we're going to recognize and the jobs that they've done for their communities. We have the privilege of watching sports and learning to do team building through sports, and we thank you for those activities. We just ask that you would bless the food that we will eat later to our bodies to give us strength, and we ask you that we would all be about your business. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Mike Harwood.
Well, again, it seems like this time of year rolls around really quickly, and thank goodness that Bob and Woody, we start checking in with them early in the year to get this on their calendar, because it seems like they get busier by the moment. But we appreciate everyone taking time on a Monday night to come out and join us. We hope you're going to enjoy the event. It always turns out to be very special. The inductees are certainly well deserving, and I think you'll hear some good comments and some good reminiscing tonight. Certainly these events don't take place without sponsors. Throughout your program, you will see various sponsors who have helped sponsor the event. Albemarle Printers sponsored the programs and did a very good job for us again this year. And also the chamber staff, Tom Ramser, Deidre Harwood, and Stephanie, they all worked very hard to put this on as well, and they're in the back of the room. If you see them, thank them before you leave. The Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame, this is our 25th anniversary actually, and the process for nominations is something I wanted to go over with you in case you have someone you feel deserving to be a member of the Sports Hall of Fame. The Chamber accepts nominations. There's a written format for that. You can get those at the Chamber office, and they will be submitted to a committee. The Sports Hall of Fame committee does not make the decision on who is inducted. We have an anonymous committee that does that. I honestly do not know who is on that committee. I appoint one person to head that up, and from then on I have no idea who it is. And they have a big file of lots of deserving folks. We still have lots of folks who grew up in Stanley County who are in their college Hall of Fames who are not a member of our Sports Hall of Fame. And fortunately, the list keeps growing. So the folks who have been inducted certainly are well deserving. The folks who are yet to be inducted are well deserving, and hopefully we'll get to all of them as the years go on. And I told Leon when I did the interview, I said, when Bob and Woody tell me they can't make this anymore, I'm done, because they make this a whole lot easier, I promise you. And we have the Hall of Fame display cases over across the street at what some of you may remember as the Quimby Mall. It's now called Stanley Commons, and it's where the county offices are located and some other agencies. And quite honestly, we've outgrown our display cases once again. And recently, the Chamber sent out some letters to folks asking to make donations toward a new display case, which we are in dire need of now. And some folks have been very gracious to send donations toward that. And we hope to get a new display case built and in place sometime before the next year's event rolls around. But if you have not been there, please take time to go to Stanley County Commons and see the memorabilia that's in the display case. There are things in there that are really, really neat that I think you'll like to see, including Johnny Palmer's Ryder Cup things, some things from Bob and Woody that are just really neat to see, and all kinds of other stuff. So take the time to go see the actual Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame display, and I think you'll be glad you did, and take the children as well. As I mentioned, this event never takes place without the help of Bob and Woody, and Albemarle and Stanley County is so proud and so fortunate to have these two guys who grew up right here and learned their trade here in Stanley County and went on to be heroes in the field. And I did this a couple years ago, and I'm going to try, I'm probably off a little bit, but if you think about these two gentlemen right here, they have almost 80 years combined in broadcasting, which includes, I believe, over 800 football games and 2,500 basketball games combined, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe not exact. 25 Final Fours. Now, who wouldn't give whatever to sit courtside at the Final Four and broadcast for Duke or Carolina? They've done it 25 times, if my math is correct, and 8 national championships, winning the national championship 8 times. They've sat there and broadcast, and each one of them has their own things that they remember that is just priceless, and all of us have heard it played over and over on ESPN or whatever. The Leitner shot, Woody when they made the bad pass, called the bad timeout, the whole 9 yards. It's just priceless moments that Albemarle and Stanley County's very own Bob and Woody were fortunate enough to be a part of, and we're proud as we can be to have them. And yes, sir.
We sounded an awful lot better when we won.
No, I know, yeah. I have no doubt, but you still sound good any time. And I'm sure Mick's going to have a lot of opportunity to say a few things about these two guys when he gets, yes, he will. And so, anyway, again, we appreciate everyone coming. I'll be back with a few more comments at the end, and they'll be short. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the voice of the Duke Blue Devils, Mr. Bob Harris.
Are you insinuating that if some people hadn't gotten lucky that we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to broadcast those Final Four championship games? You're right, we wouldn't have. It's great to be back in Stanley County. I was sitting there thinking a few minutes ago what I need to do before I leave the county tonight. I think I'm going to pull off to the side of the road and see if I can find a fresh plowed field, take my shoes and socks off and wiggle my toes in that red Stanley County clay. I think that'd be just the way to top this evening off. But it is always good to see so many familiar faces and to meet some new ones. And this county has a lot to be proud of in its athletic endeavors and its history. And we're just so proud to be back every year and be a part of this banquet. It's my indeed pleasure right now to introduce those who are among us tonight who have been inducted on prior evenings like this to this wonderful Hall of Fame. And as I call your name, would you please stand? And you have all the information in your programs. I'm not going to bore you with statistics. I'm just going to recognize the Hall of Famers, have them stand, and let you welcome them, okay? We are happy to have from the class of 2012, last year's 2 inductees. First of all, Rick Russell. Rick, stand. Let's give him a hand. And Don Davis, Jr. Don, over here. From the class of 2011, Jimmy Bubba Lisk. And also from that class, he is not going to be here. Okay, we'll not introduce him then. Moving right along as we go from the newest to those in other years. From the class of 2007, Lonnie Chandler. From 2006, Ken Frazier. From the class of 2002, Monty Montgomery is represented tonight by sister-in-law Ann Bird. From the class of 2000, Doug Knotts, represented by his son John. From the 1998 class, Dave Holcomb. From the class of 1995, Charles Meisenheimer, represented tonight by sons Chaz and Robert. You know this too, we were 93. From the class of 92, and I've got to make one comment because Just over a week ago, his number 23 jersey was retired by Pfeiffer University at their baseball stadium. Coach Joe Fairby. From the class of 1991, Ernest Bear Knotts. The 1990 class saw Don Montgomery go in. He is represented by his widow, Ann Bird. Ann? And now the keystone, I think, upon which this hall was started and built, Coach Toby Webb. Coach? What memories those names bring back to all of us. And I know, having interacted with the majority of those myself, but it's always a great pleasure to see you fellas back, and ladies too. Our first inductee of the evening is a young man that I first saw in 1968-69 when he was a student at North Stanley High School, and I was broadcasting the games for WZKY. He played basketball for Hall member Joe Kelly from 67 to 70, and that 70 school year was the first year that I picked a WZKY all-county basketball team. And Jack made that team, and he went on to also earn all-conference and all-tournament teams, and took those talents just a few miles north of here to Pfeiffer College, where he played for the Falcons for 2 years. He graduated with a BA in Business Administration and Economics in 1974 at Pfeiffer and remained on the campus as the assistant men's coach for the 75-76 seasons, as well as the head JV coach in 76. And from 77 through 82, Jack was the women's coach, where he guided the Lady Falcons to a number 13 national ranking and the national tournament in 1979, earning Coach of the Year honors in 78 as well. Now, spring times saw the versatile Jack Ingram coach the women's softball teams to national prominence. For 14 straight years, his Lady Falcons finished either number 1 or number 2 in the conference and advanced to the playoffs. And one of the proudest moments in his 17-year tenure, I guess, would have to be the 96% graduation rate of the softball players. That is phenomenal. 2 of them were academic All-Americans. Jack was tabbed Conference Coach of the Year in that sport 3 times, 79, 81, and 89. And while all this was going on around him, he also managed to get his Master's of Science in Recreation Administration from UNC Chapel Hill in 1980. Notice I didn't even hesitate when I said that. Jack is now in his 33rd year at Pfeiffer University and his 10th as a department chair for sports management. I think he's done about everything at the university except hold the president's title of that, and there's still time for that, Jack. Well, I almost forgot one thing. Since 2002, he's found time to be an assistant women's basketball coach at North Stanley as well. Now, Jack and his wife Nancy have 3 children, William, Charles, and Elizabeth. I want to ask you folks to please stand and be recognized here. And it's now my privilege to offer for induction into the Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame, Jack Ingram.
Well, I know there's some of you out there who are probably asking the question, how in the world did he get chosen for this honor? And the only thing I can tell you is I've always been lucky. So maybe that's why. But one of the luckiest things that's happened to me was when I met Nancy McDade. She grew up about 30 miles northeast of Philadelphia in a little town called Phoenixville. She graduated from high school, headed off to East Stroudsburg University to be a student athlete and a major in education. And after 1 year in the Poconos, she said there must be someplace warmer than this. So apparently she took a dart and threw it in a map, and it hit a spot 568 miles south of East Stroudsburg, and it was Pfeiffer, and it was Meisenheimer, and she transferred there. And almost from the time she came on campus, I was intrigued by her, and we've been married for a lot of years. And you heard about our children who were who were born. Some people put them in reverse order: Elizabeth, Charles, and William. That kind of sounds kind of like the royal family, you know. But along with all of those who were already have been introduced, I have my mother-in-law here, Jean McDade, sister-in-law Cheryl, two sisters, Judy and Susan, brother-in-law Russ. Tom Childress is here. We have President Mike Miller and his wife, and I do not want that position, so you can just sit back and rest. I've got a number of friends who played ball with me. I've got some students out here tonight, and I appreciate y'all are here. And just a number of friends. Also, with a group this large, I'm sure I have some enemies out there, and what I'd like to say to you is I'm sorry, and it's probably mostly my fault. Had 5 official basketball coaches through my life: Earl Smith, Red Lentz, Lonnie Chandler, Joe Kelly, and Tom Childress. Now, Lonnie Chandler and Joe Kelly, their information is documented here in the Hall of Fame, but what you don't know about Coach Chandler is when I arrived there as a freshman, he was the head JV football coach. He was the head JV boys basketball coach, head JV girls basketball coach, the head varsity coach. He assisted the varsity football team and was assistant baseball coach. He also taught a full complement of courses, and I don't think they do that anymore, but he was extremely successful in all that he did with all those teams that he coached. I also played for Coach Kelly, and he yelled a little bit, or, well, maybe yelled a lot, I don't know. I liked him. Some people didn't like the yelling, and he said stuff to me more than once like, and you call yourself a guard. You know, what I liked about him is how much he gave of himself and gave of his time to other people so they could learn sports. I've also had some unofficial coaches and teachers who are members of this Hall of Fame with names like Palmer and Meisenheimer and Holcomb and Frazier, Lefko, Watkins ×2, Harris, and Webb, and Coach Farabee. Coach Farabee's the first guy who told me, he said, you were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that was God's intention for you to listen twice as much as you talk. And if he's talking, we all listen, because, boy, he's got a lot that he knows. A lot of talent in that group who's in this Hall of Fame. Growing up, I had a very active mind. I didn't fall in love with sports, any sport, for a while. My first love was cars, and I just absolutely was fascinated. You know, you have those people who are always active, whether they're moving or not, and that was one of me. And I remember in the 5th grade one time being infatuated with learning how to drive a stick shift, and I'd studied a guy who was driving one, and I was sitting in the class, wasn't making any noise, but I'm driving there and going in 2nd gear over to 3rd, and in my mind I'm driving through this course that had tight turns, and I double downshifted, and then the instruction just stopped, and the teacher there was glaring at me, and she left the classroom, and I said, this is probably not going to be good. And then she came back, and later that evening I found out she'd called my mother and told her, said, I'm teaching class, and he's sitting there driving his car. He will never graduate from high school. So I guess she went by that manual that you have in every principal's office, the cause and effect, where she searched through the pages and found, oh, here it is. Drives an imaginary car, will never graduate from high school. I'm not really sure where you draw that parallel. She was a teacher by title, but, you know, I'm not sure how much I learned from her. In that same 5th grade, after I finished driving the car in class, I learned about basketball a year, and that is a sport that is made for the energetic. And I got in there in PE class, and they showed us how to play basketball, or tried to, and you know, this is it. I mean, you run backwards, you run forwards, you go sideways, you fall down, you get up, you shoot the ball, you jump for the rebound, you try to dribble it. And when there's plenty of bad basketball being played, you have an awful lot of turnovers. So you can go from offense to defense all in 4 seconds, and that just completely mirrored my mind, because I could jump from 4 different subjects in 4 seconds, no problem whatsoever. So come 7th grade, it's time to go out for the basketball team. I'm going out for the basketball team. I got one goal. I want to make the basketball team. So we have the day that the cuts are going to be made, and I'm in there. I'm 7th grade. I'm on the bubble. Everybody on the 7th grade was on the bubble, except for we had a guy named Roger, and he was a full-grown man in the 7th grade, so he wasn't on the bubble. But everybody else was on the bubble. So we went into the storage room one by one, and that's where the uniforms were. And when it was, I went in there, and there was still a couple uniforms. I said, "This is pretty good. Feeling lucky again." And so the guy reached over, he looked at me, turned around. I'm not sure he knew my name, but he turned around and looked and found that I was going to be on the team. And he pulled out a uniform, he gave it to me, and I must have started smiling. He said, "Don't get excited. You're not going to play. You don't have any skills. But you're the quickest guy on the team, and you never cut the quickest guy on the team." And I said, "Oh." I came out there, and I'm going, "Okay, we got to remember, I wanted to make the team. I'm on the team. I got a uniform. I'm the quickest guy on the team." Walked out there, and I looked around at those less fortunate than me, and I'm going, I might be the quickest guy in the 7th grade. I might be the quickest guy in the 7th or 8th grade. I might be the quickest guy in all of Baden School, and I was pretty excited about that. So, that part about, he wasn't a literalist there. I played about 4 minutes a game, and I remember down at Norwood, we were playing them, and I got in the lane there and flicked up a little left-handed shot, and it went in. I got knocked to the floor, missed the free throw. But, that's pretty good for a guy who has no skills. I did make 2 points that year. The thing that happened best for me, though, was between my 7th and 8th grade. Elvin Fisher, who was the principal there, built those courts just for me. But I was willing to share them with everybody else. And that's not true. He just built the asphalt courts, and I thought they were built for me. I used to, because, I was 14 or 13 or whatever when they were built, and you had to, when the bigger guys would get there, there's not any way you're going to get chosen to play. That's the great thing about the courts there is everything was completely democratic. If you could play, you were chosen. If you couldn't play, you could not buy your way on. I mean, if you couldn't play and you were smart, you went over to the side of the gym and threw the ball off the side of the gym, learned to pass, or you dribbled on the sidewalk or whatever until the court's cleared and you could get out there and play. But those were some great times and great places. But I used to, because I realized, most of the plays going on noon when it was cool or something like that. So I would get completely dressed, shoes as well, the Friday night before, and I'd set that alarm clock in my head, get up about half an hour before the sun did, and I'd climb out my window, down the fire escape, get on my bicycle with my basketball. And your eyes adjust pretty well to the darkness by the time you get up there. And I knew that at least I was going to play by myself, and then one-on-one when one other person got there, and 2-on-2 when 4 showed up, and so forth, until they got to at least to 11, and then I might be off doing something else. But a lot of fun. I got to see the great players. I got to see both of the Watkins boys, and Garland Davis, and Bobby Lauder, and Sam Miller, and those were just the ones from Baden. And then, when they knew that these new courts were there, people started showing up from everywhere. We started playing a lot. Followed that by going to a basketball camp. My luck continued. There's 450 people at the basketball camp, and 28 of us had Pete Maravich as our counselor. Now, the people who sat next to Pete on his left side, that entire week it changed, but it never changed as to who sat on his right, and that was me, because I needed to talk with him about various things. And I guess I was aggressive or assertive enough that you're not going to take that spot, you might be dreaming. But I talked to him, he showed me all these little drills to help you with your quickness. And I told him I wanted to dunk the basketball, and he said, well, what you need to do is go home and get you a 2x4 about 2 feet long, keep it under your bed at night, slide it out, do 100 toe raises before you go to bed every night. So I came home from the basketball camp, dropped my clothes as I got in the living room, headed to the basement, cut a 2x4. Of course, me being a detailed guy, cut it exactly 2 feet, went up, put it under my bed, did 100 toe raises that night, did them every night for about 2 weeks. And this is, where you get those focused people. After 2 weeks, most people, or some people at least, would have said, this is not worth it. I said, well, if Pete said do 100, I could probably do 200. So I did 200 every night, and I did that for about 3 weeks, and I said, if I can do 200, I can do 500. So I did 500 toe raises every night for 3-4 years, and I guess it was about 2 years before I could dunk it. But that was one of the byproducts of that. It seemed to make me quicker to the ball. And remember, I was already the quickest guy in the 7th grade. So I had gone beyond the 7th grade by now. But so those things helped, and I played in high school, and then I talked with Lenore Ryan. I don't remember the guy's name who was there. I talked the year before. I was a senior with Jerry Steele, who was no longer at Guilford. And I talked with Bill Connell down at Wingate. But when I met Tom Childress, that's the guy I wanted to play for. So I went there, and things never turned out exactly the way that he or I, either one, envisioned. I went there with a severely torn up ankle and probably tried to play on it a little bit too soon. During the first 2 years there, I broke 3 different fingers, had a bruised sternum, chipped the tip off my elbow. And that's one of those injuries that's painful when it happens, but it really is painful for a long time if you touch it, anything for the next 6 months. And then the worst of the worst, I got a pull growing, and that neutralizes quickness. So it didn't matter whether I was. The only thing I had to do is reach out and grab when somebody went by. And he was looking for somebody else, and I was looking for relief. But we stayed close and touch with each other. And the last 2 years, when he had somebody injured and need somebody to practice, I'd come over there. And then after I graduated, I'm sitting on the steps over at, or just before I graduated, I'm sitting on the steps at Jane Freeman, kind of looking out into the future. I'd had one interview with a bank, and he came over and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm pondering my future." And I said, "I've had an interview with the bank, but I don't know whether I want the job for it." And he said, "What about coaching?" I said, "Tell me more." And we started working together. We won Pfeiffer's first basketball championship. I think it had far more to do with Tom than it did with me. But we still won that. We worked well together because we were macro and micro. Tom is a big picture guy. He organizes these things. I'm a little bitty detail guy. I try to see tendencies that people do that are good for us when they play for us, and tendencies that people have when they play against us, and see if we can prevent them from doing that. So we worked well together. I left Pfeiffer after 2 years and wanted to find myself, and I found myself back there working for Tom when he became the AD, and he said, "I want you to coach women's basketball and to start a softball team." And I said, "I can probably do that." So we did, and we had some success. Then I thought I was out of coaching, and this Karen Hinkle called me back in 2002, said, "The girls' basketball coach at North Stanley has resigned." I said, "Yeah, I'd read that." She said, "Why don't you have an open mind?" And I said, "I do." She said, "What do you think?" And I said, "About what?" And she said, "About coaching." I said, "I don't." And she said, "You don't what?" And I said, "I don't think about coaching at North Stanley. If I wanted to do that, I would have probably still be coaching at Pfeiffer." So, it's kind of rude, but that's sort of the way it was. And then 2 weeks later, they hired Greg, and I called her, and I said, "This guy's good." I said, he's one at places that you don't normally think of as coming in with basketball powers." And about 2 weeks after that, I saw Greg at the golf course, and he said, "Hey, what about being my assistant coach?" And I said, "Greg, I don't want to coach." So I came home kind of jokingly, mentioned that at the supper table, and my oldest son, William, said, "I think you ought to do it." So Greg and I got together, and I said, "Okay, here's the rules right now. I'll work for you for a year if we both can have this agreement. If you don't like the way that I'm doing things, you can say, 'Jack, you need to leave.' Or if I don't like the way you're doing things, I'll say, 'I'll see you later, and we'll try to remain friends.'" And so we did. And what a great thing. Here we go, macro and micro time, volume 2. He's the macro guy, the big guy. I'm the little detail guy. I'm the one who hollers. He's the one that helps him out. But since he came to North Stanley, and I know basketball has changed a lot, but in the first 40 years North Stanley was there, they had 4 ladies became 1,000-point scorers. And in 9 years that he was there, he had 7 1,000-point scorers. 250 wins in 10 years. I think y'all can figure the math on that per year, what he would be doing. And been a great deal of fun for me to be able to coach with him. And we've had some good success with 5 different conference players a year. Went into the state tournament ranked number one 1 year, and that's a great tribute to him. So I've been lucky. I've been fortunate. I'm probably sure I got something here that I want to say. And I do want to thank the members of the Hall of Fame Selection Committee for this honor. And I really want to thank whoever allowed me to get through this without getting emotional. So, thank you. Thanks.
Let me start off by echoing what Bob said a moment ago about coming back home, because I don't get back here as often as I would like to, but each time I come back, It's a delightful experience, and I thank all of you for being here tonight to acknowledge these two people who are going into the Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame tonight. As I started preparing for my introduction tonight, I realized that just several weeks ago, and I can't even remember now where we were, but I ran into Les Young. And I talked to Les like I thought he was going into the Hall of Fame. And Les is qualified for that, although he might not admit that. Les, I have to stand on my tiptoes to see whether or not you're reacting to that. But anyway, the gentleman that I am going to induct tonight is Les's dad. And he was a gentleman that was very close to my father when both of them were trying to get Little League Baseball started, Kermit in Norwood and my father here with the Optimist Club and American Eford Mills in Albemarle. And I tried to put some things down, and I kept going back to the program and thinking about what was written about Kermit. And so I hope you don't mind, but I'm just going to touch on some highlights that are in the program because that article was done well enough to tell us what we need to know and told me a few things I didn't know about Kermit Young. For example, when he moved to Stanley County in 1932, it was to serve as manager of Belk's Department Store in Albemarle. I had no idea. From the time I knew him, he was in Norwood, and he had a business there. In 1939 was when he moved to Norwood and started the Young Manufacturing Company. At this time, he also became involved with area amateur athletics that would continue for the rest of his life, and he was just a really, really special person in that regard. Since his days as manager at Belk, Young had organized and played for business-sponsored basketball and baseball teams that traveled and played other area teams. Then Albemarle hosted the National American Legion Championship in 1940. Young and several of his workers volunteered their time to help prepare the old Eford ballpark for this major event. Following World War II, Young helped organize a league of industrial baseball teams from Stanley and surrounding counties. He played first base for the Young Manufacturing team and was soon asked to serve as league president. It was also during these post-war years that Young Manufacturing donated the materials and constructed the concrete bleachers at the Norwood High School baseball field. Recognizing his enthusiasm for sports and his organizational skills, Kermit Young was often asked to form new leagues, especially for young athletic programs, youth athletic programs. In 1951, Kermit Young pulled the Norwood community together and organized a youth baseball program for boys ages 13 and under. He led the effort for Norwood to join the official National Little League program, and he and a few other community leaders in Norwood in 1953 led a fundraising effort and constructed a regulation Little League ballpark. Norwood hosted the area Little League tournament. The Norwood Little League All-Star teams enjoyed great success in tournaments over the next several years, and Young served as league president for most of those years. And that's when he and my dad got to working very, very closely. During this time, Young often came straight from work in his white shirt and tie to drag the Little League ball field on his company's Ford tractor. In the 1950s, the Stanley County school system did not fund football programs at individual high schools. The Albemarle City Schools had a special city school tax that enabled Albemarle High and Kingville to support football programs. Funding from Alcoa allowed football to be played over in Baden and West Baden High School, but none of the other county schools had a football program. Through the organizing fund efforts of Kermit Young, the town of Norwood raised enough money to build its own football stadium at the high school and to furnish a team with football uniforms and equipment. Each school had to assume the responsibility for organizing and funding its own football program and stadium. With Kermit Young once again leading the way, the South Stanley community built not only a football stadium, but the nicest football stadium in the county at that time, complete with its own track for springtime meets. During the 1960s, Kermit Young joined forces with well-known golfer Robert Eisenhower to organize and raise funds for building a golf course in the Norwood area. Through many hours of work and the assistance of loans and grants, their dream became reality as construction on the Piney Point Golf Course began in the fall of 1963. When Kermit Young passed away in 1971, the South Stanley Sports Council petitioned the Stanley County School Board to name the high school stadium after him. The school board approved this request, and on September 29, 1972, the South Stanley football field was officially named K.L. Young Stadium. You do all of this, you read all of this, you absorb all of this, and you wonder why, because this is one of the hardest things in sports, why it has taken this long to pick a deserving person. Bob Harris and I are going back to Raleigh for the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame on Thursday night. 11 people will be inducted into that organization. And Bob and I very well know that the work is not done. We'll go to 300 members, but we've got a lot out there who haven't yet been recognized. Les, come forward and let me give you the plaque which honors your dad for his membership in the Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame.
Whenever my father was contemplating a decision, and there were others around, he would listen. And everyone would have a chance to say what they had to say. But when the time came for decision, you could expect my father to pop his hands, and everyone knew, okay, Kermit is calling us together. He's going to tell us what we're going to do. And that was my dad, our dad. On behalf of our family, we extend our grateful appreciation to the Chamber of Commerce, to the selection committee, and to those who lobbied for our father's induction, and to you who are here tonight to share in this celebration. Please allow me to introduce our family and some who knew our father very well. First, at the second table, my sister, Adelaide McNeil, and her husband, John, from Norwood. They have 3 children here. The oldest is Jack McNeil. He's from Fuquay. And Margaret Gilliard and her daughter, Carolina, from Greer. And Mary Lou is the youngest. Mary Lou Bowers from Concord. Seated with them are our cousin and his wife, Jean and Brenda Bosch from Cabarrus County. At the table up front where I was seated, these men represent the folks that Daddy worked with and the young men who played sports in Norwood. I'm going to start with introducing 3 exalted roosters. That's what they used to call the JCs who aged out, the ancient JCs or the exalted rooster. Here to my right is Benny Russell. Next is Raymond Skidmore and Bill Talent. Now they worked side by side with Dad, picking up rocks, doing design work, running errands, after work, during work, whenever. And there were people all around doing that. Now I want to introduce 4 of the players on these teams that Woody was telling you about. To Benny's right is Franklin McNeil. He used to pitch and play second base maybe and halfback on the football team. Raymond Morton. He was a great pitcher too, and a outfielder, running back. On around is Wade Louder. He played on the line. Wade now lives in Kannapolis. And finally, Tommy Skidmore. He was our end the first season we played football, and then he moved to quarterback when we went to a T formation and played basketball on a championship team at High Point College. What Woody had to say, his remarks are true, very accurate. Our father's efforts were instrumental in achieving many worthwhile goals, but little would have occurred without the enthusiastic support of citizens like these. There were the Lions Club, the Volunteer Firemen, the VFW, the Merchants Association, Collins Enablement Corporation, the Future Farmers of America members, the JCs, Robert Eisenhower, our father's partner in getting Piney Point together, and of course our mother, who endured all of this, and our father's younger brother and business partner, Robert Young, who also endured. But they loved what my dad was doing, and they were with him all the way. None of these people benefited financially from their efforts. Their work can be characterized as a labor of love for the community and its youth. Well, I could stop here, but I won't. There's so much more to say. What my father and his friends accomplished at mid-century was not isolated. They followed examples set by earlier generations. Ed Snuggs is here tonight. Ed, where are you? Wave to him. I've heard it told, not by Ed, but by others, that the Norwood Cotton Mill's old baseball field, the one located where the Darrell Allman Community Park, the pond and the fountain stand, it had no outfield fence. But to alleviate that condition, Ed's grandfather and his father gave timber and slabs from their sawmill, and his two uncles, who were the pitcher and catcher on the Norwood team, Eli and Glenn, and their friends built an outfield fence out of wood. The coach of that team was Oscar Holcomb, and his son is sitting right here smiling at me. Wave to us, David. Nearly 100 years ago, in 1913, Norwood's new grand school was opened. Norwood's new graded school, it was called, was opened. It had 11 grades, 7 teachers, and a principal. The citizens of Norwood schools, the Norwood School District passed a bond referendum to construct the $20,000 school and to extend the school year to 8 months. Naturally, there was no funds for a ball field. Men in our community brought their horses and mules and drag pans and carved out a diamond on a rocky hillside on the school grounds. Rocks were hauled away. A mixture of clay and sand from the riverbanks was spread on the infield. So wonderful was this diamond that the Montreal Royals of the AAA International League came the following spring, in March, for spring training in Norwood. We had a hotel then. It burned down some years later. The Royals traveled to play teams in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and Charlotte. And the New London team even came to play the Royals in Norwood. Although it was a losing effort for them, two of New London's hitters connected for triples. Their names were Sherrill and Nash. That same spring in Fayetteville, a 17-year-old named George Herman Ruth entered professional baseball, pitching for the Baltimore Orioles, and later that season, pitching for the Providence Grays, both teams members of the International League, along with the Royals. It was in Fayetteville that the Babe acquired his nickname. Now that's not all. Wade Lauder is sitting right here. Wave your hand again, Wade. His uncle Bob Kendall told me about playing Saturday games home and away against Mount Gilead. The youngsters would climb aboard a wagon and ride to Bennett Ferry, once known as Allington Ferry. They'd cross the river and enter Mount Gilead to play the game. The round-trip ferry passage cost a dime, I think he said. That was for the wagon, the team of horses, the players, and the coach. Farther back, in 1892, this is the year after the first train came to Norwood, the Norwood newspaper, we had one then, described a game against a visiting Salisbury team. Hundreds of spectators attended, including dignitaries from at least 4 counties. At the end of 5 innings, the umpire called the game. The score, Norwood 22, Salisbury 2. Some say it was getting dark. Others that the engineer blew the whistle on the train, announcing the impending departure of the last train to Salisbury. You see, in every generation there are those who provide opportunities for youth sports. My father and his friends were carrying on that tradition. In subsequent decades, numerous others picked up the banner and marched forward. Some, I'm confident, followed the example set by my father and his friends. 2 that I'll mention are the late Tommy Underwood, and his widow is sitting here somewhere. Ruth, would you raise your hand? Stand up, maybe. And Raymond Morton. If you'll raise your hand again, Raymond. In 1965, when I returned home from work abroad, Tommy Underwood and Raymond Morton were coaching Little League Baseball in Norwood. It was their time to lead. The honor bestowed on our father tonight, in many respects, is recognition of the multitudes of volunteers and supporters of youth sports in villages, towns, and cities everywhere. During the years following our father's era, new opportunities have emerged. Opportunities for female participation, for racial integration of teams and leagues, for the handicapped in Special Olympics, and even for senior citizens. My family and I, once again, thank you for the recognition you bestowed on the work that our father so dearly loved.
Les, thank you very much. I've got to be careful with what Mike has asked me to do next. And the reason I have to be careful is that if I don't do this right, Mick Mixon knows me well enough that he'll get back at me. So I'm going to work at it really, really hard. First off, I want to introduce to you one of the best things that's ever happened to Mick, and that would be his wife, Dawn. Dawn, stand and let us say hello to you and thank you for coming. Coming up on, 2 years, June 18th? I don't know how you did it, Mick, but good job. Mike sent me a copy of Mick's biographical material, which I think Mick did himself. And as I looked at it and thought about what I was going to say tonight, I decided, well, I'll just read what Mick wrote about himself. That's as fine an introduction as I can give him. How about this? Born on a cold, rainy Wednesday, October 1st, 1958. Gerber baby, cute as a toddler, but then started to get progressively worse looking into adulthood. Now that's just the beginning. Graduated UNC Chapel Hill in May of 1980 with a BA in broadcast journalism, radio, television, and motion pictures. Then began what is now his 33rd year as a sports announcer. He spent a brief time working for Eb Gant in Belmont and later at WIS in Columbia, South Carolina. But also during that time, he was able to go north to the state of Maine, where he was the radio and TV voice in the International League of the Maine Guides, a AAA baseball club. He came back to Chapel Hill in the late 80s and spent 16 years as the color analyst and production manager for the Tar Heel Sports Network. He taught 2 classes in the UNC School of Journalism during that time, journalism and mass communications. For 6 years, he taught those courses, and consistent was the recipient of the department's highest professor approval ratings, and I know that for a fact because I was always among the people that he invited to come and speak at his class. He was the only non-official to ever be inducted into the Atlantic Coast Conference Football Officials Association. When we had a call on the field in any Carolina game that we did for those 16 years, I never said a word. I just turned and looked at him, and he was already telling what the rule was. He was the North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year in 2009, because after the 2005 season and the Carolina Championship in St. Louis, he decided to accept the offer from the Carolina Panthers to be their play-by-play voice, which he did in April of 2005. He was the Sportscaster of the Year, as I mentioned, in 2009 while with the Panthers, but at the same time, while working on the Tar Heel Sports Network, he won that award in 1999 and 2004. Interestingly enough, in spite of all that he does in speeches like this and being involved with the Panthers and promoting them around the 2 Carolinas and so forth, he has time to play in 2 working bands, Franklin Street and Mick and the Ultras. They're pretty good too, pretty good. He likes to jog, lift weights, write, mess around with cars, do yard work, and play some golf, at which he is very good. And the final thing, he's kind to children and small animals. Gives unselfishly to charity. He is a dedicated recycler and just an all-around swell guy. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice of the Panthers, Mick Mixon.
Nothing I can get back at you for.
Oh, thank you very too hard.
Thank you very much.
My goodness. Well now. Thank you, Woody. Congratulations, Mr. Ingram and the family of K.L. Young as well. And my remarks, as is customary here in Stanley County, are brought to you by Matt Smith and WSPC WZKY Radio, featuring Carolina Panther football each fall. And, you know, I try never to accept speaking invitations where loquacious luminaries like Woody and Bob are on the dais. Because speaking with Woody and Bob here is kind of like being on the driving range right in between Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods. It's a lot of pressure. If I could, I would take my little bag of range balls, go way over yonder to the corner of the range, and just be by myself. But it's an honor to be here on behalf of the Carolina Panthers. And Woody, thanks for mentioning my wife, Dawn. We got off the elevator, and this old boy, I was going in the restroom, and I don't want to mention his name, but this old boy grabbed me, and he said, "Son, is that your wife?" And I said, "Well, yes, sir, it is." And he said, he wiped me on the back, and he says, "Man, I always like a man that doesn't know his own limitations." So thanks, babe. I love you, and I appreciate you being with me tonight and always. For 16 years, I was able to eke out a living on the Tar Heel Sports Network, saying such insightful, intelligent, and witty comments such as, "You're absolutely right, Woody. Now back to you." And then, Bob, sometimes I would change it up. I would say, "Woody, I couldn't agree with you more. Now back over to you." In fact, I can tell you tonight that since I no longer work there, many nights I wasn't even at the games. I just recorded things like that. And then Woody would hit the play button when he needed to take a breath or an Isodent lozenge. But it was a joy, and I swear I could fill a small book with the lessons that I learned from listening to Bob Harris and watching him work, and listening to Woody Durham and watching him work. I want you to come with me in your mind right now to Charlottesville, Virginia. It was the fall in the mid-'90s. The Tar Heels of Mack Brown go to UVA. The Tar Heels hadn't won there since 1980. First quarter does not go well. It's all Virginia at this point. On the Tar Heel Sports Network, we come back from a break, and your humble color analyst here says, "Welcome back to Charlottesville, Virginia. Bright, sunny November day, but things are not going well in Tar Heel. The score is Virginia 14, Carolina nothing. First downs are Virginia 6, Carolina none. Time of possession, Virginia 11 minutes, 15 seconds. Carolina 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And right now, the Tar Heels have a drug problem on their team. And that is that their defense is getting drugged up and down the field by Virginia's offense. There's a long pause. Finally, Woody speaks. First and 10 Tar Heels at the Virginia 30. He just kind of let that sit out there. I actually thought it was pretty funny. I remember thinking to myself, you know, I didn't plan to say that really, but dang, that was pretty good. Well, on Monday, William Mack Brown called me into his office. Dumb old me, I thought, well, maybe he wanted to get my suggestions for some ball plays that we could run so we didn't lose to Virginia every time. Well, he closed the door of his office and he dog cussed me. He cussed my parents, my grandparents, their parents. And I talked to Woody a little bit about it afterward, and Woody said, you know, Mick, Coach was right. You know, it's not something that should have been said. I learned a great lesson that day. That November day, I learned a great lesson that you have to be very careful how you use humor. It can humanize you. It can diffuse a situation, but it can also be inflammatory. Words like drugs can be very, very inflammatory. I learned a great lesson that day. That lesson stayed with me for a couple of seasons. Stayed with me till about 2 years later. And do you remember the streaker game, Bob? The Tar Heels and the Duke Blue Devils are playing basketball. And it's in the hot house, Cameron Indoor Stadium. National TV. Carolina ranked third, Duke ranked first. Middle second half, we come back from a commercial break. I'm giving some stats. Woody's sitting there to my right. And all of a sudden, this crowd, this incredible roar. And here is a man dressed in nothing but dark blue finger paint and Converse high-top tennis shoes. Zero. You youngsters who are here, your parents can explain what streaking is on your way home tonight. But this streaker's dancing around, and I have the floor, so I kind of launch into this play-by-play. I'm saying, oh, there's a streaker. He's wearing dark blue. He cuts to the left. He cuts to the right. And the security guards tackle him under the east goal, and oh, the humanity. And for one of the few, maybe the only time in his life, Woody is not there with something to say right away. I look over at him, and his eyes are kind of big, his mouth is open, so I just think this is a good opportunity for me, so I continue on. I say, well, ladies and gentlemen, they tackle the streaker, they drag him off, and since I look at my watch and I say, since it's not 11 o'clock yet, I'm not at liberty to tell you what the streaker looked like. But I can tell you that now would be a great time for a Beefmaster Frank.
I'm glad they weren't our sponsors.
Because Beefmaster was our sponsor. You see, this hot dog company. And I learned from Woody that you should never let an opportunity to patronize your sponsors go by. This is a failing that a lot of broadcasters have. We don't do that on the Tar Heel Sports Network. Man, we got a lot of mail about that. And I talked to Woody a little bit about it later. And, the humor thing again, I said, yeah, I know. And so that night I learned a really valuable lesson. Now, you got to be very, very careful what you say on the radio. You're representing something much bigger than yourself. You're representing the University of North Carolina. And that lesson, it stuck with me. It did. It stayed with me until the 2003 season, when this one night Woody and I are broadcasting a basketball game, and I used to like to read. I'm curious about the human body. I like to read the medical journals and the New England Journal of Medicine, the mortality and morbidity report. And for some reason, I'm just fascinated in this kind of thing. I like to watch the Discovery Health Channel. And my wife Dawn, she can, she'll tell you that I watch surgeries, and I'm interested in that kind of thing. But Woody, this one night, he's going to do the Beefmaster hot dog reader, and he's always immaculately prepared. He's got some stats. So he turns to me and he says, Mick, I got a stat for you. Did you know that every minute of every day in the United States of America, 5,000 hot dogs are consumed? I wonder how many of them are Beefmaster Franks. I said, well, Woody, I really don't know, but in a stat that's very closely related to your stat, did you know that the average man breaks wind 20 times per day and produces 1 liter of gas per day? I had just read this in this article about gastroenterology. I thought it was fascinating. So, once again, there's the long pause, and I'm waiting for Woody to come back with something, and he's way too smart for that. He knows that the best thing for him to do is to say, Ed Cota will inbound baseline. So I learned a great lesson that day. I got a letter, actually one letter poured in. It was from this guy, Mr. Bradshaw. And he's incensed. He writes, to whom it may concern, Tar Heel Sports Network. Why is it, I graduated from UNC in 1957. Why is it that I have to listen to Woody Durham and whoever that other guy, that Milt Mason guy, that Mick Mickerson, why do I have to listen to him talking about flatulence on the radio. I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about the Tar Heels. So this letter gets into my mailbox, and I take out a piece of paper, Tar Heel Sports Network stationery, and say, Woody, I'm going to write Mr. Bradshaw back. So he said, Mick, that'd be a good idea. You know, you're learning these lessons. I said, yes, sir, I am. So I say, Dear Mr. Bradshaw, my name is Mick Mixon. I uttered the comment that you wrote about on December 7th, and I sincerely apologize. Not only that, but I thank you so much, sir, for writing. It is feedback like yours that enables us to improve as broadcasters. We hope that you'll continue to patronize the Tar Heel Sports Network and our many sponsors. Most respectfully, Forrest O. Mick Mixon III. Then at the bottom I did P.S. and I drew a picture of a hand with his fingers sticking out. And I said, pull this. I didn't send the letter. I wanted to real bad, but these lessons and things that I learned just really stuck with me. And so I didn't send it. I wrote it all over again, and I left out the P.S. But seriously, I really did learn so much about life and about how to be a professional from hanging around the Atlantic Coast Conference and Woody and Bob. Everybody knows Bob and Woody, and you know, Bob, there's no friendlier guy. He's never met a stranger, as the old saying goes. And as far as my friend Woody goes, I've never talked about this publicly before. I probably never will again. But I want to say here in his hometown and in his home of Albemarle and in Stanley County, as I close my remarks, that my mom and dad passed away in a commercial airline crash in 1989, just a couple of weeks before I started my job with the Tar Heel Sports Network. And Woody and Gene didn't know me, but they reached out to me as if I were almost like a son. And I know that I owe Woody, you and Gene a debt for what you did for me and to me and with me that I'm confident I'll never be able to repay. But I want to say thank you tonight. Congratulations again, inductees. Go Panthers. And I hope Dawn and I can come back to Stanley County very soon. Thank you.
I would like to direct your attention to toward the back of the program. You'll see a list of our previous speakers that have spoken at this Hall of Fame, many of which were here due to these two guys. I have to say, though, from Mike Krzyzewski to Roy Williams to everyone we've had, Mick, that was one of the best we've ever had. That was great. That was really good. And with that said, if you missed anything that he said during his remarks or any of these remarks, you'll be able to see this replayed on Time Warner Cable Channel 21. And we'd like to thank...
The FCC hears about it.
Yeah, that's right. We'd like to thank Brian Carter with Carter Video Services who filmed tonight's event, and it will be played quite a few times on Channel 21. Also, Bob has a book, and Woody has a book, and Bob has some with him. He'll be in the back where you came in with some books. If you would like to purchase one, he'll be happy to sign it. And Woody has a book that he has recently done that we have. If you would like to tell him a little bit about it, Woody.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. I'm doing this only because Mike said that he'd like for us to do this. I don't have any of the books with me, because when you write a book, you'll find out that the publisher will give you probably a box or two of them at the outset, so you can give those away to family and friends and things. And then after that, you got to buy your own books. So I don't have any with me right now, but I have access to get them. And what we've done, since there are no books here, if I've given Mike some of these, and he'll put them outside. This is just a form. Tells you where to send it after you've completed the form, and $28. And put your name and address on there, and tell me what you would like for me to write when I sign the book, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Mike asked me to do one other thing, and this is as close as your computer to ordering this. We're right now in the midst of a tremendous expansion campaign for the Ronald McDonald House of Chapel Hill. Ronald McDonald House in Chapel Hill has been open since 1988. It has served over 22,000 families from all 100 counties of North Carolina, 38 other states, and 9 foreign countries. But we are having problems now because we are having to turn people away. 800 families were turned away last year because there was simply no room. And with the Children's Hospital and the Cancer Center and so forth there, that's what's attracting more and more people to Chapel Hill to do what they have to do to try to get their children well. Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to expand the Ronald McDonald House to 53 rooms. And it will be a first-class deal. There will be a playground outside for the youngsters and so forth. And as part of the fundraising, the first year I was no longer on the network, I did a series of features for both the football and basketball games. We had 13 features for football and 12 for basketball, and they're put in this jacket. And all you need to do is go on your computer to woodyremembers.com, and they're $15 a piece if you'd like to have it. For, I won't say the old timers, but Coach, we've got an interview with Charlie Justice in the first cut about the Texas game in 1948 when Carolina had lost the year before down in Austin, and the Texans are coming to Chapel Hill. Carolina's got them 21-0 in the first 5 minutes of the game, and Carolina goes on to a great win. And we go through all of that. And basketball, we've got 12 of those, and they're pretty much in chronological order. And my favorite is the first one when Vic Huggins, the Carolina cheerleader in 1924, who got Charlie Woolen, the business manager of athletics, for $25 to get a bighorn ram from Texas as the Carolina mascot. And the reason they got the ram was there was a guy that played football at Carolina by the name of Jack Merritt, who was nicknamed the Battering Ram. So that's why they got it. And anyway, when they built the tin can, which was in place of where Fetzer Gym is now on the campus, they decided they'd take Ramesses to his first basketball game. And they had everything all set up, and they had Ramesses all decked out, pink ribbons on his horns and everything like that. And so they got him in there, and the students started making some noise when they jumped around on those wooden seats. Well, as Vic Huggins says in the interview, he says, well, then Ramesses just misbehaved right in the center jump circle. And he's explaining why Ramesses has never, ever been to another Carolina basketball game. But anyway, the 57 guys are on here talking about the fact they felt no pressure when the 32-0 season that won the national championship. And there's also every play that happened in the 8 points in 17-second game against Duke in 1974 in Carmichael Auditorium. Woody Remembers on your computer, $15. If you do it, we appreciate it very much. We're right now at $4.1 million, and we need $7 million in order to get this project completed. Thank you very much for your patience tonight and your interest.
Just a couple more thank yous. WSPC 1010 and 1580 WZKY, as Leon likes to say it. We appreciate all your support. They allow us to come over and do some interviews and promote the event. And Matt and Leon do a great job for Stanley County. One thing I wanted to bring your attention to also is, on behalf of Mick Mixon, the Stanley County Chamber of Commerce is making a $500 donation to his favorite charity, which is called Classroom Central. And I felt like it was appropriate for you folks to know about Classroom Central if you do not, because honestly I did not. But it's an organization that equips students living in poverty to effectively learn by collecting and distributing free school supplies. Basically, the teachers in various areas, which include Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Gaston, Iredell, Statesville, Union, Kannapolis, and Lancaster, the teachers can get free school supplies for the children who live in poverty whose parents cannot afford school supplies. And the website is classroomcentral.org, and Mick assures us that they spend the money very wisely, and you might want to go on that website and check out that charity, as it sounds like a worthy cause, and we're happy to do that on Mick's behalf. And the last thing I have is on your table, each one has a program. There's a silver star on the back of one of the programs. Whoever has the silver star is the lucky winner of the beautiful flower arrangement donated by Lowe's. And they also are actually hanging baskets. And Deidre and Stephanie, you can see them in the back and get the hanging basket thing. Everybody likes to win something. Well, we'll get him a flower. So, all right. I think it's time to eat some good Chef Tim hospital food. And trust me, if you have not eaten the food of Chef Tim, you will be greatly surprised. It is not hospital food. It is wonderful. And we hope we see all of you next year at the 26th Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Keep your eyes in the paper and listen to the radio, and we'll let you know when it is. And we hope we can get a speaker anywhere near as good as Mick Mixon. Thanks, Woody and Bob. Thanks you. Congratulations. Have a nice night.